8-7 vote to approve the curriculum. The materials were created this year by the Texas Education Agency after a new law required the department to make a statewide curriculum for school districts to use after approval from the Education Board. Supporters of the curriculum welcome the State Board of Education's vote, saying that the curriculum will help students learn, and they accused opponents of trying to ban the Bible from classrooms. Mm-hmm. That's the latest. Those efforts align very well with President-elect Donald Trump's plan for a more conservative agenda in public school classrooms, including shutting down the Department of Education. And so that is a sense of what's afoot in Texas, and what happens in Texas could very well happen in a school district near you. Here in California, a highly contagious whooping cough situation is rising in California to the highest levels in years. A highly contagious and potentially dangerous illness, whooping cough, has surged in California this year, staging a comeback to levels not seen since the start of the COVID-19 pandemic. Across California, there were fewer than 300 reported cases of whooping cough, also known as pertussis, all of last year. So all of last year, you had 300 reported cases. This year, how many cases do you think we got? 1,744 reported cases statewide as of the end of September. That's according to the California Department of Public Health. Those at risk for whooping cough are infants younger than 1 year old. That's according to the U.S. Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. Other people at higher risk of severe illness include those who are immunocompromised or who have moderate to severe asthma. In LA County, where our home station is, there have been 347 confirmed and probable whooping cough cases so far this year, up from 126 reported in all of 2023, and more than quadrupled the 2022 totals. And so be careful out there, especially for our leaders, learners, and listeners that are immunocompromised. Ain't no shame in putting your mask on and social distancing until we get some clarity on or a handle on this. And so be safe out there. Speaking of being safe out there, if you're a ground beef eater, you definitely want to hear this story. More than 100,000 pounds of ground beef are recalled for possibly having E. coli. That's right. Detroit-based Wolverine Packing Company recalled nearly 170,000 pounds of ground beef it distributed to restaurants across the country. That's according to the U.S. Department of Agriculture's Food Safety and Inspection Services. The Minnesota Department of Agriculture alerted the agency about several illnesses last week and collected a sample of the ground beef a week later that tested positive for E. coli. The fresh recalled products have a use-by date of November 14th, 2024, so check your freezers. And while the frozen products have a production date of October 22nd, 2024, right? And so look for use by date, November 14th, 2024. Look for production date, October 22nd, 2024. Restaurants should throw those products out. Just a reminder that E. coli illness can cause dehydration, bloody diarrhea, and abdominal cramps 2 to 8 days after exposure to the organisms. And so be safe out there. This is our public health call to action. In better news, how many of y'all are Kendrick Lamar fans out there? And if you're a Kendrick Lamar fan, I'm not sure if you're as big a Kendrick Lamar fan as I am, but the Washington Post is reporting that Kendrick Lamar just happened to decide to pop out and show the world his sixth album, GNX, today. This after a highly successful year for the critically acclaimed artist, which included dominating a rap feud with Drake and cinching the headlining slot for next year's Super Bowl halftime show. Lamar unexpectedly dropped a link to the album on his social media accounts, along with a black and white photo of him wearing a handmade ERL belt made with vintage pins as he posed in front of a classic Buick GNX car, sending the hip-hop scene into an explosive frenzy on social media. And so it's 12 tracks. That's what's been reported. The 12-track, nearly 45-minute album is mostly Jack Antonoff produced and boasts vocals from SZA and mariachi singer Dara Barrera. And I can't wait to listen to it. I'll be listening to it all this weekend. I'll tell you what I think on Monday. And that's if Miles hasn't already listened to it, because Miles stays on top of stuff. When we come forward, I'm really looking forward to being in conversation with a friend of the station. He is not unfamiliar to many of us. Jesse Jackson Jr., the former congressman, is joining me in studio live to talk a little bit about his story and give his hot take on some of the biggest trending headlines today. You are listening to and streaming A More Perfect Union on KBLA Talk 1580. More when we come forward.
Say the quiet part out loud. KBLA Talk 1580.
So the thing no one tells you about periods is that your flow changes every day, and so should your tampon size. Tampax has 5 absorbencies to match your changing flow. If it's uncomfortable to remove, go down a size. If it leaks, go up a size. And only Tampax has a leak guard braid to help give you up to 100% leak and odor-free protection. All-day comfort and protection for up to 8 hours for under $5 a month. Based on average U.S. consumer usage at manufacturer's suggested price, however, pricing is at the sole discretion of the retailer, excludes 8-count packs.
The official Eras Tour book coming to Target on November 29th, featuring over 500 photographs from the tour, including never-before-seen performance and behind-the-scenes images. And for the first time, the Tortured Poets Department, The Anthology, with 35 tracks on CD and vinyl.
Only at Target.
If you're living with dry age-related macular degeneration or dry AMD, you may be at risk for developing geographic atrophy or GA. GA can be unpredictable and progress rapidly, leading to irreversible vision loss. Now there's something you can do to
slow it down and get it going slower.
Izervay is proven to slow GA progression.
Izervay gets GA going slower.
Izervay or avacincaptad pegol is a prescription eye injection used to treat GA. Don't take it if you have an infection or active swelling in or around your eye. Izervay can cause eye infection, retinal detachment, or increased risk of wet AMD. Izervay may temporarily increase eye pressure. Your vision may be impaired after an eye injection or exam. Don't delay. Ask your doctor about Izervay today.
Izervay gets GA going slower.
Visit Izervay.com. That's IZERVAY.com.
I feel like I'm constantly cleaning hair off my bathroom floor. At least my Swiffer Sweeper makes it easy. Sweeper heavy-duty dry cloths have ultra-thick pads to trap and lock hairs, like a hair magnet. And when I'm finished cleaning up my hair, Sweeper takes care of his too. Now the hair's gone, all thanks to Swiffer. Try Swiffer Sweeper heavy-duty dry cloths. I promise you'll love them or your money back. And also try Swiffer Sweeper Wet to make quick work of tough, sticky messes.
This is KBLA Talk 1580, where hate loses and love wins.
To A More Perfect Union on KBLA Talk 1580. I'm Dr. Nicordelai Corte, and really delighted to welcome to the show a really special person who's been sitting in for our colleague Areva Martin all week. He's been our special guest host on Areva Martin in Real Time. Jesse Jackson Jr., former congressman, is here with us right now. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. It's very much to be here. I'm happy to be here, and I look forward to talking with you, Doc.
Well, so glad to have you here. First things first, we want to just sort of update people. In terms of where you're at. We know that some time ago, you pled guilty to conspiring to defraud campaign of a little less than $1 million, and you've served your time. You have served your time, and now you are out among us, and you are going on with your life. Give the people an update in terms of where you're at.
Well, I served my country for 17 years in the Congress of the United States. When I was elected in 1995, I was not a person of means. Having a name Jesse Jackson Jr. does not come with a lot of money, but it comes with a lot of notoriety. It comes with absolutely no money. I can attest to that fact. I was elected in 1995, having run a fairly extraordinary campaign against some very, very serious elected officials. And at age 31, I was elected to Congress. Recently married, still no children. I woke up one day a congressman having to live in two cities, the city of Washington, D.C., and my home district. And with that came the expenses of living in two cities. So yes, I lived in my campaign to the tune of about $75,000 a year. That's the name of the expense. I don't know if it was a conspiracy to defraud. That's just what I did, and I owned that behavior. I pled to that, came to, according to the courts, about $750,000. Again, $75,000 a year. I didn't walk out of my campaign with a big bag of money and leave. I just lived in it. And I don't think that I'm the only congressman who lives in their campaign. People come from as far away as California. They've done work in the streets. They've been in community. They get to Washington and they need an apartment. They need a condo. But
And they ain't cheap.
And they are not cheap. And so, there's an imbalance in the Congress between those who are very wealthy members of Congress and those who are young, poor, black, brown. I remember when AOC was elected and she was a bartender. Well, now she's from New York and she works in D.C. She has to strike the balance between how she lives in both places. You can't suddenly get rich in Congress. But there are allowables and disallowables, and I accepted that behavior. After 30 months in federal prison, I then came out and I made an extraordinary discovery while there, spending time with men who paid their debt to society, who shared with me all of their expenses. It's how we did our time. And I made a discovery in the Constitution called The Finger of God. I did not name my book The Finger of God because it just popped into my head. Alexander Hamilton says, 30 days after the Constitution is written, for my part, I sincerely esteem the Constitution, a system which without the finger of God never could have been devised amongst a diversity of interests. In the Federalist Papers, James Madison says that it is impossible for a man of pious reflection not to see in it, the Constitution, a finger of that almighty hand that is signally responsible for the revolution. And so when I came out of Congress after having done very serious research for more than a decade, I released a book called The Finger of God. And in it, I discovered that there are millions of men and women who are incarcerated, both federally and state, who, when they pay their debt to society, they enter another phase of their lives, which is called felonization. Now, I was given 30 months by a federal judge, right? But I've been a felon far longer than I have been incarcerated. I've been a felon for more than 10 years. And it's very difficult for those 77 million Americans who've paid their debt to society, they did what the judge said do, what the jury said do, to seek clemency or to seek pardon or to seek forgiveness. And the brilliance of the founders' experiment is that they believed one hand should be responsible for passing out the grace of God in our system, and that was the President of the United States. For them, there was no Bill of Rights in 1787 when they added that to the Constitution. That didn't come until 1791. So the power to forgive was vested in the President of the United States, and I've been working on men trying to get them pardons ever since I got out.
And speaking of the work that you've been doing and the work that so many folks in the criminal justice movement have been doing, folks have been urging President Biden to use his clemency power to tackle this crisis of mass incarceration. It's been reported recently that more than 60 members of Congress have written to President Biden calling on him to use that presidential power that you just spoke of to reunite families and to address unfair sentencing policies and begin to tackle the scourge of mass incarceration, which they say is eroding the soul of America. Are you one of these estimated 4,000 requests for a pardon from President Biden?
The last that I heard, the number was somewhere around 17,000 people who've filled out an application. And yes, I am one of them. My ex-wife is one of them. Congressman Bill Jefferson is one of them. Congresswoman Corinne Brown is one of them. Warren Ballentine, one of our radio talk show hosts, he's one of them. There are millions of Americans who've paid their debt to society. Now, mind you, I'm not encouraging Joe Biden to use his pardon power to let people out of prison who've not served their time. I'm talking about the bus drivers, the cab drivers, the Uber drivers, the barbers who learned to cut hair in prison, who've been out. They've paid their debt. They've not reoffended, but they deserve to have their rights restored. There ought not be any question that the most fundamental and the first fundamental right that the architects of our republic put in the Constitution was the president's power to forgive men, to forgive women, to forgive the fallen and to restore their lives, to completely wipe out felonization. And yes, I support the call of Ayanna Pressley, of Jim Clyburn, and other members of Congress who stepped up and said, close that gap. Let's eliminate felonization as a category for all Americans, regardless of their race, their sex, their class, or their pedigree.
And speaking of Congressman Clyburn, who's been quoted having said, quotes, so many people who are serving extensive sentences today are there because of crimes that are victimless. That is astonishing, and it should be dealt with. Of course, Representative Clyburn's participation in the appeal may carry some weight, some people say, given his relationship with the president. The congressman's widely credited for having helped Biden secure the Democratic presidential nomination in 2020. Have you been in touch with Representative Clyburn, and has he given you any reason for optimism in these remaining weeks of President Biden's term?
So I've certainly raised this question with Jim Clyburn and Maxine Waters and other members of the Congressional Black Caucus. I've raised this issue with Nancy Pelosi, and we've not heard from the president. He has he's in a very unique position as president of the United States, because the fact of the matter is his son needs one. And his son could be looking at 20 years on the gun offense and on the tax offense and on the fraud offense of lying about purchasing a gun while addicted to narcotics. And so the president is probably more sensitive than any president in history. And the only argument that I make is, if it's good enough for your son, if it's good enough for Richard Nixon, if it's good enough for Paul Manafort, if it's good enough for those who have access to the halls of power in Washington, D.C., what about the millions of Americans who don't have access? They don't have pedigree. They don't have contacts. If you hire a lawyer in Washington, D.C. to advance a pardon request, it costs somewhere between $250,000 and $500,000 to get well-known counsel to advance that case. Well, we simply don't have it. So we live as felons. We live as bus drivers.
200. I just want to slow this down for a second, because this is news to me. $250,000 to $500,000,
and there's no guarantee that you'll be pardoned.
Just to make the case for a pardon?
Absolutely. That's the pardon industry in Washington, D.C. But my work, my scholarship that Dr. West, Cornel West, had read, and Dr. James Forbes have read, and dozens of other scholars, clearly the grace of God, as it's structured in the Constitution of the United States, should not be something that we have to pay for. It's not something we have to beg for. In fact, it is our first right before the Bill of Rights, because this right is placed in the Constitution on September 17th, 1787, and the Bill of Rights doesn't happen until 1791. So this is the original intent of the architects, and we are on solid ground by making the case that men and women who've paid their debt to society should be forgiven. Now, I want to make it clear, Doc, that there, at any given hour, there are 2.5 million people in prison. I don't know if Joe Biden in 60 days has time to look at every case adjudicated by every judge and every jury in the nation on this question. I'm specifically talking about the 77 million who did what the judge said do, who did what the jury said do, have paid their debt to society in full, and today they still can't get a job. In some cases, they still can't vote. In some cases, they have to fill out applications, and every time they go to a job interview, someone does a Google research on them, and it shows that they had a problem in their life at some point in time, and I find that particularly troubling, and we ought to do something about that in the last 60 days.
President Biden has 61 days before he leaves the White House in which he could pardon or commute the sentences of incarcerated Americans. This letter, which folks can Google, is signed by a number of prominent Democratic politicians and spearheaded by progressive politicians, as mentioned, Congresswoman Ayanna Pressley of Massachusetts, Jim Clyburn of South Carolina, among others, urging President Biden to act while he still can. When we come forward, we're going to dig into some of the biggest headlines, including talk about how Black, Latino, and young voters have shifted political leanings this election. We want to get Jesse Jackson Jr.'s thoughts on this, especially as compared to the old Rainbow Push Coalition. A lot of comparisons being made there, maybe some falsely. We're going to figure it all out right here on A More Perfect Union on KBLA Talk 1580.
KBLA Talk 1580 is an intervention. When we come forward, includes you. KBLA Talk 1580, turning pain into power.
I'm Amber Payton with 4 Things You Should Know from BIN News. Sean Diddy Combs is in court for a bail hearing in New York City. The entertainment mogul charged with racketeering and sex trafficking will try to make another case to get out of jail after spending the past 2 months behind bars. The Los Angeles Department of Water and Power has agreed to a $60 million settlement with Sun Valley residents after a toxic gas leak sickened over 1,200 people. The lawsuit claimed LADWP endangered the area's Black and Latino communities by failing to prevent methane leaks. An appeals court upheld the firing of Lafayette, Louisiana Police Chief Thomas Glover, ruling his 2021 termination occurred during his probationary period, exempting him from civil service protections. Glover claims he was fired because he was Black, and he plans to appeal the Louisiana Supreme Court. And fans of McDonald's McRib will soon be able to buy a jug of the sauce used on the famous sandwich starting on Monday at 10 a.m. Eastern. Get BIN News on demand 24/7 at BINnews.com.
Hi, I'm Kyle at Blindster.com. I started Blindster in 2010 in my garage after I overpaid for new blinds. I researched the industry, hired my mom, and 14 years later, we're one of the largest retailers of custom blinds in the U.S. Don't pay too much for new blinds. Go to Blindster.com.
Is this the title? This is the KBLA Sports Minute with Ray Richardson.
UCLA is facing a must-win situation Saturday night in their rivalry game against USC at the Rose Bowl. The Bruins are 4-6 with 2 games remaining. If they lose to USC, the Bruins will miss out on playing in a bowl game. NCAA rules require 6 wins to be bowl eligible. USC at 5-5 becomes bowl eligible with a win Saturday. The NBA and NFL has issued warnings to all their players to upgrade their home security systems after a recent rash of home burglaries. In the past 2 weeks, the homes of Kansas City Chiefs players Travis Kelce and Pat Mahomes have been robbed. Home invasions also occurred in the properties of NBA players Bobby Portis of the Milwaukee Bucks and Mike Conley of the Minnesota Timberwolves. Tomorrow night at 7 here on KBLA, join me and my co-host Neil Scarborough for Out of Bounds. 60 minutes of sports chatter with some flavor. No debates, no speculation, just the info you need. That's your KBLA Sports Minute. I'm Ray Richardson on KBLA Talk 1580.
We're not just a thermometer recording and broadcasting popular opinion. We aim to be a thermostat, transforming the conversation about climate justice in our community. This is KBLA Talk 1580. Talk 1580. We've got a lot to talk about.
I'm Reverend Gerald, the life coach. Is someone you love struggling with addiction and mental illness? Is improving your family's health important? Want to leave a legacy that your family can grow? Are you ready to enhance your perception of life experiences? Then wake up weekends at 7 a.m. with Urban Family Focus and get the wisdom, opportunity, resources, and motivation to live your best life. Join the conversation on Urban Family Focus Saturday and Sunday at 7 a.m.
Unapologetically progressive. KBLA Talk 1580. We've got your black.
This season, Chevy brings classic pairings, cookies and milk, mistletoe and kisses, and your holiday plans and a new Chevy. Silverado 1500 gives you power and capability with 430 pound-feet of torque to haul your holiday tree. The Equinox EV and all-new Equinox, America's best compact SUV for new vehicle quality by J.D. Power, offer both confidence and style. to see you through the holiday season. It's easy to see why Chevy makes everything better and brighter. Find your red tag. Get 0% APR financing for 36 months on select popular Chevy models when you finance with GM Financial. Chevrolet, together let's drive. Award based on 2024 models for J.D. Power 2024 U.S. Initial Quality Study Award information. Visit jdpower.com/awards. Offer available on all 2025 Equinox and 2024 Silverado, Equinox EV, Blazer EV, and Silverado EV models. Monthly payment is $2,860 for every $1,000 you finance. Example down payment is 22.2%. Must finance with GM Financial. Some customers may not qualify. Not available with lease and some other offers. Take new retail delivery by 12/2/24.
An official message from Medicare.
Couple more minutes, and we'll start this month's book club.
You know, I usually love a plot twist, but this year, I'm comparing my options during Medicare open enrollment.
You can't assume your current health or drug plan is the best one for you.
And you gotta make sure your drugs are covered. That's important.
So is saving money.
Review all your options at Medicare.gov. Open enrollment ends December 7th. Paid for by the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services.
Oh no, stomach issues again?
Stomach issues?
Who are you?
Your pancreas. I could be the real reason for your diarrhea, gas, bloating, stomach pain, or loose oily stools.
I thought it was my stomach.
People often do, but any of these symptoms could mean having a condition called exocrine pancreatic insufficiency, or EPI. With EPI, the pancreas doesn't release enough enzymes to break down food, but EPI is manageable. Use the symptom checker on identifyepi.com and speak with your doctor. That's identifyepi.com. Sponsored by AbbVie.
Find a righteous rage, and don't be afraid to say what you see. We're KBLA Talk 1580.
You're listening to and streaming A More Perfect Union on KBLA Talk 1580. I'm Dr. Nicordelai Corte, and really delighted to be in conversation with former Congressman Jesse L. Jackson Jr., who is quite the advocate for the formerly incarcerated, people who have paid their debt to society, who have done their time. He has reached out to President Biden to secure a pardon, as has thousands of other people. I mean, there are over 4,000 requests for pardons on his desk. There are currently more than 12,000 petitions for commutations on his desk. And President Biden has 61 days. 61 days left before he leaves the White House in which he could pardon or commute the sentences of so many incarcerated Americans, many of which we know. Jesse, I've got to ask you this question. If it was up to Vice President Harris, in other words, if pardoning was one of the things that was put in her portfolio, how might you think this White House would be approaching this differently?
If she were allowed to complete the last 60 days of the Biden administration as President Harris and not Vice President Harris, I think it would be the strongest legacy amongst probably any president we've ever had. If you think about it, when you read the Bible and you read the Bible stories of Jesus' ministry with respect to forgiveness, maybe, Doc, there's a dozen stories, maybe. The prostitute, the throwing the rocks, the forgiveness offered the men on the cross. Maybe there's a dozen stories. But to have the power to forgive more people on earth as it is in heaven than are in the Bible is of epic proportions. That's more people forgiven than lived around the Sea of Galilee 2,000 years ago. And so don't underestimate the significance of that, not just on the scale of those who filled out pardon and clemency applications, but those who, again, have paid their debt to society, have not reoffended, and those numbers are in the tens of millions. And on this other, question of what Kamala Harris could do if she were president, and I want to remind everyone that William Henry Harrison was president of the United States for 30 days. He was elected. He went to inauguration on a freezing day, decided not to wear a coat. He stayed outside. He caught pneumonia, and 30 days later he died. And so your presidency is not a function of whether or not you're there for 4 years. You can be there for 15 minutes if you're president of the United States. And I would imagine that from President Kamala Harris, we might see a different courage with what remains of her administration, in addition to the idea that I'd like to see her transfer power to Donald Trump and actually witness that myself. I think she'd build a presidential library. I think it would inspire women. I think it would inspire our daughters. She would be in the annals of history as the 47th President of the United States. He would be the 48th. But in the last minutes of that administration, I think we could expect, even in 60 days, great things. But lest should we forget that what makes Joe Biden so unique is that his son needs one. And the idea that his son could do 20 years in prison if Donald Trump does not pardon him, or he's not pardoned, ought to be troubling for the president. And he has to think about other sons, other daughters, and other Americans at this hour.
That's quite a case that you lay out there. And speaking of so many of our fellow Americans, there's this debate over whether demography is destiny. And it's been written that the 2024 presidential election showed clearly it's not. You know, Democrats have long believed that the diversifying of the country could lead to the party's long-term success, but President-elect Trump was able to win over so many voters that Democrats believe that they could rely on. Here are just a few clear trends. Democrats lost ground with voters under 30 in nearly every swing state with the exception of Georgia, where Harris gained slightly, and Arizona, where support was the same. Another trend, there was a seismic shift with Latino voters. In the last few elections, they've gradually declined in their support of the Democratic Party, but 2024 saw a dramatic swing to the right. In some states like Pennsylvania, Nevada, and Michigan, Latinos shifted right by more than 20 points. And black voters also supported Democrats in lower numbers compared to previous elections in many places. We know what the national numbers are, but we're zeroing in state by state, and we see that there was one notable exception, Wisconsin, where Democrats saw a steep decline with black voters. And so clearly, demography isn't necessarily destiny. How do you reconcile that with the origin stories of the Rainbow Push Coalition?
So my father ran for president in 1984 and 88, and clearly in the context of the Reagan years and the Reagan administration, the idea of building a multiracial coalition was at the center of his campaign efforts. In fact, he said red, yellow, brown, black, and white were all precious in God's sight. He said that every patch in the rainbow, whether it is the Native American, the red, the yellow, the Asian American, the Occidental, whether or not it's the female patch, they all have a place under one tent because we're all Americans. So in large measure, Dad spent a considerable amount of time organizing a rainbow coalition on the basis of race, coming out of the racial history and the racial divide. We may, Doc, have to reconsider some of that organizing, and as you said in your remarks, take it a little bit deeper. Each of these patches in the rainbow represent a pain patch. African American men and women who've been overly incarcerated, they're in a lot of pain waiting to figure out what Joe Biden's going to do for his son versus their lives. And then they have to explain that pain, why Joe Biden's son was forgiven, but they weren't forgiven. That's a pain patch for 77 million, many of whom are white, many of whom are poor, many of whom live in red counties. That's very painful. October 7th was a pain patch. It's not just Jewish, it's a pain patch for people who lived through the Holocaust. And then they find themselves attacked by a terrorist group. Jewish Americans, members of our coalition, are in a lot of pain. But so are Arab Americans who have experienced Netanyahu's response to that pain in Gaza, in Syria, in Lebanon. Arab American communities in a lot of pain, and they showed us that pain on November the 5th. Women are in an awful lot of pain as their rights are taken from the federal government, the entity that builds a more perfect union from state to state. And we're watching the Dobbs decision now take that power from Washington and return it to the states, as if in our own history we had to experience the fugitive slave laws, where if you escape from slavery you got to go to another state, and then that state sends you back to slavery. So we understand the significance of states' rights. And maybe going forward, we're not talking about a racial rainbow coalition. Maybe we're talking about a coalition that organizes pain, because some people who did not vote for Kamala Harris on November 5th, well, they messed around. And now they're going to find out. We're going to watch people being shipped out of the United States, incarcerated and sent to detention camps where there could be horrible acts against their basic humanity taking place. You don't want to vote? You don't want to participate? Well, you're going to join. You're going to get a big pain patch. And it's not just illegal immigrants that are at stake. If your surname is Garcia Rodriguez or any of our Latino, but you better prove, if a police officer pulls you over, you better be able to show them your driver's license. You better be able to show them a proof of citizenship. I mean, racial profiling on a scale that we haven't seen and can't possibly imagine. So you don't want to vote for the end of that kind of treatment? Well, mess around, you're going to find out. So we must be in a position, I believe, Doc, to welcome the pain, shoulder the burden of the pain of various groups, and build a new coalition by the sheer amount of suffering that I believe is going to take place over the next 4 years and beyond. So not just a racial rainbow coalition, we have to look in these rural counties where my car broke down on the Pennsylvania Turnpike while I was on the campaign for Kamala Harris. I spent 3 or 4 days in Harrisburg, went to Gettysburg, spent time in Lancaster and Lebanon, Pennsylvania. Didn't see any Kamala Harris signs, saw nothing but sea and seas of red as I Ubered through some of those communities. And I can tell you right now, those people to whom we think we speak for, because they identify with the urban core, we don't speak for them. They didn't hear us. They didn't see us. And it didn't just start with Kamala Harris. It started long before then. Democrats have to reach out and touch people and make room for them in the party. And I recommend that we not organize a racial coalition. Be mindful of it, but we need to recognize a pain coalition, a pain and suffering coalition.
Pain and Suffering Coalition, indeed. When we come forward, it's time for the quiet part out loud with our special guest, Jesse Jackson Jr. You're listening to and streaming A More Perfect Union on KBLA Talk 1580.
A safe place to go loud. A great place for progressive politics. KBLA Talk 1580.
Medicare open enrollment is here, and it's a time you can make changes to your health coverage. Yet, watch out for enrollment and marketing scams. Remember, Medicare will neither call you nor solicit your business. Guard your card. Never give out your Medicare number to strangers. Unsolicited calls, door-to-door visits, and emails are prohibited. Take your time. Don't feel pressured to make a quick decision. Report scams to our California Senior Medicare Patrol at 1-855-613-7080. Tips to help improve basic steps for building a budget in 2024. Building a budget can help you achieve and reach your financial goals. With a budget, you can keep track of your spending, avoid and get out of debt, limit overspending, pay bills on time, and build solid savings habits. What's the best way to get started? Figure out how much to set aside for expenses, like rent, mortgage, bills, groceries, and entertainment. Understanding your past financial habits can help you make the proper adjustments for your budget. Adjusting to a budget can take time as you work to find the right balance, but keep working on it. For more financial health tips, visit chase.com or stop by a local branch. This segment is sponsored by J.P. Morgan Chase & Company.
Are you an entrepreneur looking to take your business to new heights? KBLA Talk 1580 is your partner in success. Every day, we celebrate and elevate Black-owned businesses across our community. Our KBLA SMB Marketplace currently features The Cookie Dip, Bad Ash Bakes, Hair Concoction, Higher Education Accreditation Consulting, LACC Radiology Technology Department, and Malik Books. Your business deserves to be heard. Let KBLA Talk 1580 amplify your voice and connect you with our powerful community of listeners. Email smb@kbla1580.com today. That's smb@kbla1580.com. At KBLA Talk 1580, we've got your black.
$5,000. That's the average amount of money people in the U.S. are now spending on gas in a year. $5,000. That's crazy. If you drive, you have to download Upside, the free app that gives you cash back every time you get gas. That's right. You can earn real cash back with Upside just by buying the gas you're already buying. You can literally start earning cash back today.
I use Upside every time I fill up, and I've already made around $200-300.
You're putting gas in your car anyway. Why not get real cash back?
back. If you like free money, download Upside.
I'm saving the cash I earn from using Upside to help pay for a vacation later this year.
Download the free Upside app now to earn cash back every time you buy gas. Use promo code SNAP to get an extra 35 cents per gallon on your first tank. You can cash out anytime right to your bank, PayPal, or a gift card for Amazon and other brands. Just download the free Upside app and use promo code SNAP for a 35 cents per gallon bonus on your first tank. That's code SNAP for a 35 cents per gallon bonus.
This is KBLA Talk 1580, where everybody is somebody and nobody is a stranger. You belong here.
You are listening to and streaming A More Perfect Union on KBLA Talk 1580. I'm Dr. Nicordelai Corte. He is the great former Congressman Jesse Jackson Jr. He is with us for the hour. I have really enjoyed our conversation of great substance, of great insight. In that spirit, while we have you, I got to get your thoughts on Trump's transition team, which is turned to Project 2025 after disavowing it during the campaign. I mean, if you believe that, NBC News is reporting that President-elect Trump and his allies disavowed the conservative Project 2025 during the election, seeing the conservative transition plan and policy blueprint as a liability after Democrats attacked it. But some close to Trump even suggested those tied to the efforts would be shut out of potential administration gigs. I don't think we're seeing that at all. Any predictions in terms of the life and legacy of Project 2025?
Yeah, I'm crystal clear on it because, I've given it some study. When I look at the United States and its development from 19 scared Africans in 1619 to the Declaration of Independence, let's call that the pre-construction phase of the country. When I think about 1776, the Declaration of Independence, the writing of the Constitution in 1787, the Bill of Rights in 1791, and you think about free and slave states being admitted to the Union, one free and one slave, right up until the Civil War, which I call the Great Quake, when it all fell apart, and then comes first Reconstruction. From 1877, Tilden-Hayes Compromise, to 1896, Plessy versus Ferguson. Then you go from Plessy versus Ferguson to Brown versus the Board of Education. That's known as Jim Crow, but a Supreme Court decision. Brown versus the Board of Education started second Reconstruction. Project 2025 means this, that there is going to be an intermittent period of some new form of Jim Crow. Let's call it Jim Crow 2.0. Call it whatever you want because it has an ideological, a theological, a Christological bend to it. To overturn Brown versus the Board of Education, bring an end to second Reconstruction. And some people think that we just go right to a third Reconstruction. Some people, Peniel Joseph, for example, in his book, Third Reconstruction, initially made that argument. I think William Barber made the argument of the desire for third Reconstruction. But there is, between Reconstruction periods, first Jim Crow, and we're going to go through some period of second Jim Crow. And from my perspective, Project 2025 is an outline for them on how to initiate the separate and unequal doctrine from college education to every form of government service to a state-centered federalism away from the idea of building a more perfect union. And that's what's in front of us. So I can't summarize it, Doc, any better than that, other than to say that all of the red flags are in place and every bit of evidence, the appointment of a woman to be the Secretary of Education who's a professional wrestler and no history in education, the appointment of Matt Gaetz, fortunately he's withdrawn from the Attorney General's race, and other unqualified people to run the federal government shows you a profound and tremendous disdain for the progress that we've made.
And speaking of these people, the receptiveness of using Project 2025's database for potential hires comes as this transition has already shown that it's open to tapping contributors to the effort for administration jobs, including Tom Homan as the border czar, Brendan Carr as chairman of the Federal Communications Commission, and John Ratcliffe as the CIA director. And so all this talk about, we really aren't about that Project 2025 life. Yes, you are, because you're tapping the contributors of it to lead your administration. In our final moments together, I want to give you an opportunity to share, to amplify something that we have in common. So once upon a time, when you were a member of Congress, you hosted a show called A More Perfect Union, and now here you are, full circle.
That's right.
You made it.
That's right.
You're on A More Perfect Union here, right? But you didn't stop there. You also have a book called A More Perfect Union. Tell us about it.
In 1995, when I got to Congress, I came right in the middle of the Newt Gingrich revolution, revolution of devolution, reconstructing the federal government, the contract with America. And so because Democrats were in the minority, I had 5-6 years to just think, to tour, to travel, to go to Civil War battle sites, to spend time in Newt Gingrich's district. That effort led to a history of African Americans from 1619 to the present, at that time, 2001. Before my co-author, Frank Watkins, who was my communications director for 17 years, died in 2019, we updated A More Perfect Union, available on Amazon.com, by Jesse Jackson Jr. and Frank Watkins, of the history of African Americans from 1619 to the present. But the most significant part about that work is this. African Americans are responsible for more amendments to the Constitution than any other single group, starting with the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments. And those amendments, when read together, move us from the paradigm of states' rights in the 10th Amendment to the idea of human rights. For if slavery is a states' right, then states' rights can never be human rights. So when we see women's rights turned over to the states, when we see immigration turned over to the states, when we see health care turned over to the states, when we see the environment turned over to the states, it is impossible to build a more perfect union unless we have national coordination by a Congress, not 50 governors, not 50 state legislatures. So each state has its own voting system. Well, after 9/11, we decided that we don't want local governments to run airport security. So now everybody has to wear a blue shirt, a badge, they have the same training. You can't get a bottle of water on an aircraft, and I don't care what's on your laptop, you're going to get it inspected or it's going underneath where it's still going to be inspected before it gets on the plane. Because on the question of aviation security, we wanted to settle the question of a more perfect union. We do it with highways, we do it with train tracks, we do it with red, yellow, and green stop signs. We do it with red stop signs on various corners. No one gets to say our state gets to have a blue stop sign, a yellow stop sign. No, they're all the same. So we build a more perfect union on these questions. But when it comes to education, to health care and housing, we say let the states handle it. Well, in those states are black communities. In those states are Hispanics. In those states are women. In those states are poor people, black, white, striped, and polka dotted. In those states are the least of these. And the only chance that they have of working their way out of their condition is if we have one standard in Washington, D.C., and the rest of the states respect those standards. Let me close on this. Imagine taking off from Los Angeles, California, on one length of runway, but the governor of Illinois and the city of Chicago decide, well, we're going to have a shorter runway when Doc's plane gets ready to land. And no.
Not my plane.
Yeah, right. We have to have the same standard in California for taking off that lands in the state of Illinois. Well, we must treat education, health care, housing, and basic human rights the same way. And that comes from the struggle of African Americans. That's why we're unapologetically black and unapologetically progressive.
Well, speaking of being unapologetically black and unapologetically progressive, I can't let you go without giving us a word about your father, Jesse Jackson Sr., who was such a trailblazer, whose legacy that we still live in, we still learn from. Give us a word of encouragement that your father passed along to you that you like to pass along to our leaders, learners, and listeners. We got about a minute.
What I can say about Dad is this. I've never met a man like him. He's a human being. But he has courage. He has a plumb line for justice. He has a center of gravity. And most importantly, I'm more convinced than ever that his life is his ministry. My father is in a sect of one. He's not part of a group. He comes from a very, very special place, including his rejection at his own birth, how he transformed that rejection, that nobodiness, to referring to his single mantra, I am somebody, is not only for our people, but it's a self-affirmation for himself. And I've never seen a man quite like him. He's coming to Los Angeles. He should be landing shortly for Barry Gordy's birthday.
Oh, wow.
And he can hardly talk. He's in a wheelchair, but he wouldn't miss this city, this event, and this time with his friend. And I'm so grateful for him. He's stricken with the Parkinson's, and I can only ask their listeners to keep the Reverend Jesse Jackson in your prayers.
Thank you for that. We shall do that. My thanks to Jesse Jackson Jr. for being here with us and leaving us with some encouragement. We really appreciate you.
Doc, thank you for having me.
And the sacrifice that you've made, that your family's made, to help build a more perfect union. Pick up that book. A More Perfect Union is available on Amazon. We're going to have to leave it there. My thanks to The Village that helps us produce A More Perfect Union each and every day. Our executive producer, Tavis Smiley. Our sound engineer extraordinaire, Miles Lowe. Our show producer, Robert Battles. And podcast publishing guru, Odell Bodie. Remember, don't panic. Organize. Do what you can from where you are with what you have. I'm Dr. Nicordelai Corte, and you've been listening to and streaming A More Perfect Union on KBLA Talk 1580.
KBLA 1580 Santa Monica.
I'm Amber Payton with 4 Things You Should Know from BIN News. Sean Diddy Combs is in court for a bail hearing in New York City. The entertainment mogul charged with racketeering and sex trafficking will try to make another case to get out of jail after spending the past 2 months behind bars. The Los Angeles Department of Water and Power has agreed to a $60 million settlement with Sun Valley residents after a toxic gas leak sickened over 1,200 people. The lawsuit claimed LADWP endangered the area's Black and Latino communities by failing to prevent methane leaks. An appeals court upheld the firing of Lafayette, Louisiana Police Chief Thomas Glover, ruling his 2021 termination occurred during his probationary period, exempting him from civil service protections. Glover claims he was fired because he was black, and he plans to appeal to Louisiana Supreme Court. And fans of McDonald's McRib will soon be able to buy a jug of the sauce used on the famous sandwich starting on Monday at 10 a.m. Eastern. Get BIN News on demand 24/7 at BINnews.com.
Hi, I'm Kyle at Blindster.com. Blindster is a family-run business that began in 2010, and we've sold millions of custom blinds, shades, and shutters and received over 100,000 five-star reviews. Don't hire an expensive pro. Do it yourself and save big at Blindster.com.
Is this the takeover? This is the KBLA Sports Minute with Ray Richardson.
UCLA is facing a must-win situation Saturday night in their rivalry game against USC at the Rose Bowl. The Bruins are 4-6 with 2 games remaining. If they lose to USC, the Bruins will miss out on playing in a bowl game. NCAA rules require 6 wins to be bowl eligible. USC at 5-5 becomes bowl eligible with a win Saturday. The NBA and NFL has issued warnings to all their players to upgrade their home security systems after a recent rash of home burglaries. In the past 2 weeks, the homes of Kansas City Chiefs players Travis Kelce and Pat Mahomes have been robbed. Home invasions also occurred in the properties of NBA players Bobby Portis of the Milwaukee Bucks and Mike Conley of the Minnesota Timberwolves. Tomorrow night at 7 here on KBLA, join me and my co-host Neil Scarborough for Out of Bounds. 60 minutes of sports chatter with some flavor. No debates, no speculation, just the info you need. That's your KBLA Sports Minute. I'm Ray Richardson on KBLA Talk 1580.
KBLA Talk 1580 invites you to join us in celebrating the season of giving by being part of the solution. As we enjoy great food, family, warmth, and well wishes in whatever our festive tradition may be, we share the beauty of the season by reaching out to the less fortunate. Please help us to help others with the KBLA Cover the Houseless Cozy Community Coat and Blanket Drive. All you have to do is drop off new or clean, gently used winter coats and blankets in the KBLA lobby during business hours. Now through December 20th, all of the coats and blankets will be donated to unsheltered individuals and families experiencing houselessness. Simply bring your donation to 4434 Crenshaw Boulevard in Los Angeles, near Vernon Avenue, from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. weekdays. That's 4434 Crenshaw in historic Leimert Park. During the holidays and every day, let's remember, we keep us safe. We keep us warm. We are the safety net. And together, we can cover the unsheltered. Get caught up in the spirit of the season, the spirit of love. Make a difference with your friends at KBLA Talk 1580. You're listening
in to the DL Hughley Show. No one does your afternoons like DL. Plus, you can take him everywhere you go.
Don't drink after him. I don't know. That might spread.
Download the DL Hughley Show app now at Google Play and the App Store. You'll love it. It's the DL Hughley Show. And we're back.
My name is DL.
What did you set this on, hell? You gotta make her say my name one time here.
My name is DL.
Ladies and gentlemen, put your hands together for DL Hughley.
Wishing a very belated happy birthday to our very own Jasmine Sanders. Enjoy yourself in Cabo San Lucas.
Here.
She's on vacation every other week. I don't know what's happening.
Yeah, for real.
She has birthdays every